Who reads the small print on financial contracts? If you go to look at a credit card contract, for example, there's tiny little print like that and it's full of jargon, and there's so much financial jargon around. If you buy yourself a life insurance product or you buy some kind of disability product, what the market knows becomes more and more divergent as we see more jargon coming into the market, and what should be a simple product like life insurance starts sounding like applied maths. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and I'm joined this evening by two individuals who are going to help us look at financial literacy and whether or not it's having any impact on a market that gets more and more complex. Joining me from Discovery is financial advisor Adam Helper and Michael Field, who's a product development manager at FedGroup. Michael Field, let me just go through a scenario with you. You're a product development manager, so you sit there all day plotting and scheming and designing products that ultimately you hope people will buy and your company will make a healthy profit out of. In between you and the customer are, I suppose, legal advisors, compliance officers, executives, interferers, and all sorts of other botherers who get in the way of what should be a relatively simple offering that a customer can easily understand. Vaguely correct?
Vaguely. I think there's more to it. I think you correctly identify that a lot of the complexity comes from the legal minds and that sort of thing. But I think a lot of it starts with the product design. And I believe a lot of it is actually unnecessary.
A lot of the product design is unnecessary, or a lot of the gump in between?
The complexity of the product design.
Because there's a thing called treat customers fairly, UK concept being introduced into South Africa as part of Twin Peaks regulation, and it says that you should be able to, as a customer, understand what it is you're buying.
Rightly so.
Yeah.
And I think it's vitally important, and it's something that has been missing. I think it's a necessary introduction, and that it needs to, as I say, come from the very beginning. Something we often say is something that is simple for a client isn't necessarily simple for us to design, to administer, whatever the case may be.
But that's not the client's problem. Well, it shouldn't be the client's problem.
And it shouldn't be, absolutely. And that's what we aim for.
But then it becomes like the United Nations, where you have a ream of interpreters, and Adam Helper is one of those interpreters. Right. I mean, you've got special training which allows you to go through the complexity of product, to distill it down to its bare essence, and then to sell it, ultimately. I mean, you fulfill that role of the interpreter.
Correct, Bruce. I'm at a point where I literally have to break it down into very simple English, just for people to understand. The T's and C's and the fine print are something that people are so scared of because of history and all of the past stories that we see in the media, etc. But the bottom line is that an intermediary, I mean, you mentioned quite a bit of layers there between the product house and the final end result. It's critical that a broker or an intermediary or financial advisor of any nature is involved, an accredited and licensed financial advisor is involved in the process.
But you see, my problem with that is I would like to see you out of a job. Nothing personal, you're a nice enough guy. But if his product is simple enough to be communicated in a way that you communicate it, then why can't it be spelled out in the way you communicate it in the T's and C's?
Great question. It's a simple answer. There's a lot out there, and it's designed differently. And I mean, Michael will confirm that there are several different, although he says it doesn't have to be as complicated, the fact is that a financial plan is not a uniform solution. A financial plan is something that is unique to each and every individual. Also,
but we're talking about product here. We're talking about product. Whether it be, I mean, somebody who's trying to buy a disability cover, for example, doesn't know if they read the documents what they will get if they lose a finger, a thumb, or if their nose is cut off their face in a terrible motorbike accident. And so surely that sort of stuff should be more easily explained than it is right now.
So the product wording is normally quite, I think it's slowly become more and more simplified over the years. I mean, when I started in the industry, it was very detailed. And I think if we look at the difference between policy documents today versus what they were quite a while back, even quotations, they are a lot easier to understand. However, there has to be an element of understanding on the client's part from a definitions point of view. So there are definitions to each and every benefit. Example, disability cover, you mentioned hand. It's all a question of what percentage does that warrant the person. There are certain definitions, and there are international guidelines to that.
But it still seems far too complicated. I mean, Michael, when we look at it, I mean, Adam is terribly good at distilling to the bare essence what is represented by the work that you do, and then we got these people in the middle to make it complicated. Why can't it be explained on a piece of paper the way Adam explains it verbally when he deals with a client?
Truthful answer?
Yeah.
It comes down to two things, in my opinion. The one, providers are trying to differentiate their product. Why X, not Y? Well, Y comes with a few gimmicks. Secondly, it's more profitable to run a complex product, which someone's not going to understand. And
what's the
a lot of
motivation?
providers will do that.
But that's why kippies like me end up not trusting the industry that you represent, because we believe that the industry is out to get us. So if the industry was being honest and truthful, it would say life insurance is life insurance. You sign on the dotted line, you die, we pay. It doesn't have to come with the book of Genesis attached.
To a large extent, I agree with you. I think
Which part don't you agree with?
there is a need for some level of, call it fine print for lack of a better term, the details rather. There are certain things which, in order to offer a reasonable product, need to be excluded. A simple example in a life cover would be war and riot. It will simply collapse the entire industry if that one clause isn't there.
Now,
The multitude of clauses
the war
are not
and riot
necessary.
one is interesting. The war and riot one is interesting because I read the document and it's still not clear if I happen to be driving past the riot and happen to get dragged in, do you pay or don't you? Ultimately, the answer is yes, you do get paid, but that's not specified in the documentation.
I think to answer your question, I think it's primarily boils down to straightforward, common understanding of it's business sense.
It should be common sense, but the legalese in between befuddles you.
So it's very sad that there are people that will try and test it, and you get examples. For example, a suicide has to be excluded. You can't take out a life insurance policy today and decide just the day before you decide to take your own life. That's a straightforward exclusion on all life insurance products.
With it.
After 2 years, we pay. So after 2 years, the exclusion falls away. So there are various exclusions that are automatically included. And again, it's different product houses that have their different tiny tweaks to each and every offering. And I think that's where
do we not need to get rid of financial jargon? Because so much of it feels like it's deliberately designed to obfuscate and confuse, which is where the breakdown in trust between customers of financial products and financial services providers happens.
Absolutely. I know it's something I personally like to fight for.
But you still have to fight for it. I mean, and
unfortunately, you find yourself swimming upstream sometimes, but if a person can't understand a product, it doesn't make sense for that person. To quote Einstein, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something people should look towards when purchasing these products.
At the same time, I think, if you sit down and actually read a policy wording of any product house these days, most of the bigger players in the market.
It's enough to make you want to shoot yourself.
Well, this is the thing. So we hope you don't shoot yourself at least. Well, you can within the first 2 years, but we're not going to. So it's very straightforward with regards to, again, it's not a uniform thing. It's not, I know in the States, for example, you can walk into a supermarket and buy a life insurance policy.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. It shouldn't.
Old Mutual tried to do that in supermarkets. It had an entry-level product that it put on supermarket shelves. I don't think it's there anymore, but they did try. Yeah.
So today, with the kind of technology and information that is available via Google, via social media, etc., you're going to have a far more educated consumer. And I think the role of a financial advisor has become a lot more specialized, and the jargon is not there to fool the client. It's there to explain to the client as black and white. I know it's perceived differently by the consumer, but the fact is that the insurer is not out there to get to try and con the consumer. There's a need for it, And with that need comes a set of rules. And it's an agreement that the purchaser has with the product house. So there has to be a contract of some nature with T's and C's.
But can the contract not be written in simpler language?
Absolutely it can. I totally think it can be. But
is TCF going to make, in TCF implementation in South Africa, it's going to enforce that, but then who is TCF going to, is it going to say, Adam Helper must be able to understand it, well, that's his job, or does it say Bruce should be able to understand it, or does it say that, you know, Joe Schmo who lives down the road should be able to understand it? Ideally, you want Joe to be able to understand it, don't you?
Of course. I think, being realistic, you'll get a range of providers, and those who take it in the spirit it is implemented will absolutely build their products so that Joe down the road can understand exactly what he's buying.
Okay, so will it affect sales once we actually understand these things properly, Adam?
In a positive light, actually, I believe. I think it will affect sales in a good way, because people will be there'll be less complaints, there'll be less misunderstanding in the market. It's a critical thing that the customer, often I say to people, we had a great appointment, but I guarantee you, I phone him the next day, he's not going to remember a thing.
Yeah.
And this is sadly the way it goes. So a broker or financial advisor can babble on forever and try and explain it simply, and the customer will understand it and think, okay,
but
great.
People still sign on the dotted line even though they haven't understood it. They buy
do.
product in good faith.
In good faith,
yeah.
Right. But insurance, again, is also done in good faith. And that's where it's a two-way.
But it is extraordinary. I mean, you touched on it earlier, as to the number of people who try to get away with stuff. There's a stat, and it may or may not be true, but I like it, so let's use it. And that there would be more claims for lost Rolexes on travel insurance policies on the Costa Brava than ever been manufactured. Along that line. I mean, it's a wonderful urban legend, if not fact. And it does suggest that people do take the mickey when it comes to making their claims. So you do need the T's and C's and the legalese behind it.
Well, let's not forget that financial products, especially the long-term financial products such as life insurance, retirement savings, etc., these are grudge purchases. Nobody wants to pay for something they don't really want to see the benefit of. And of course, the minute you see that money exiting your account, you're going to think, oh, can't believe they're good on me. And that's where the problem comes in, is that automatically we're starting off on the left foot, because people don't like us, because we're a grudge purchase. But in the event of a claim, when you tell a widow that she no longer has to pay for her children's education for the rest of her life, it's a different ballgame altogether.
You can't help yourself, can you, Adam Helper? You can't help yourself. You see, he did the sales pitch right at the end. Discovery Financial Advisor Adam Helper and Michael Field, Product Development Manager at FedGroup, in agreement that, yes, it could be a whole lot simpler. We'll break down more market barriers tomorrow. For now, we'll exit our position on this particular topic. We'll buy back again tomorrow. I didn't write that. Somebody else did. Good night.